I'm Andrew Hall, and this is Dead Hand Radio Live. My guest for this episode is UFO investigator and MUFON Assistant State Director Shane Hurd. That's Arizona MUFON. Shane's interest in the UFO topic took a huge leap in 1997 after the Phoenix Lights incident. Being a resident of that area and experiencing the reaction from those who witnessed the event, Shane decided to look into the subject further. After years of being on the sidelines, reading UFO books, and studying the topic as an observer, Shane decided to go deeper into the topic and joined MUFON. He quickly became a field investigator, and his interest in the topic has continued to escalate. Now Assistant State Director of the Phoenix chapter, Shane has hundreds of case files and investigations and has written a book about the topic. Welcome back to Dead Hand Radio, Shane. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks a bunch for inviting me. This will be awesome.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the little bit of technical difficulties we had. That was my bad. But we get through these things, and we try to distribute information that's helpful and useful to the public. So that's what we're going to do. Last time we met, we talked about your book, which you had not too long ago had written, but it's close to a year old now, isn't it?
Yeah, June of 2020 is when it came out. So yeah.
So United or Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, can't read. Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, a beginner's guide to researching UFOs. Now the title of that, you've adopted the new term of UAP for your presentations and the book. How well do you think that term is catching on with the public?
Yeah, I find actually that whole topic very intriguing. The fact that UFO was the term for the longest time, and then UAP started to be used in its place. And for those that may not know, UFO, unidentified flying object, was coined by the Air Force in 1953-ish. And the idea behind that was to, they were getting all these reports and collecting these reports, and they needed a way to kind of describe what was happening in a, maybe a non-judgmental way, or without, coming to a conclusion. So, unidentified, obviously that applies. Flying, this is where people were seeing them in the air. And at that time, they were calling them an object. And we know at that time in history, what people were seeing was largely flying saucers, right? But, the Air Force didn't want to really utilize that term. And that term stuck. And however, it began to have a negative connotation to it for a couple of reasons. One is, when you think about it, if you associate with a flying saucer, that's actually something identified as opposed to unidentified. But the worst part of it is that the strategy of the U.S. government was to basically ridicule anyone who demonstrated an interest in UFOs, so that they could kind of poo-poo the whole subject. They didn't want to have to deal with it, at least not publicly. And so that ended up kind of being the National Enquirer term, and fodder for ridicule and debunkery and all these things. And it just had a real negative connotation to it. Well, serious researchers, especially some in government, needed to find a term that was less loaded with all this baggage. And I know Nick Pope has talked about that they utilize that term UAP, or unidentified aerial phenomena, as a way to get funding or authorization for a report or some project in the MOD back in the 90s, I think it was. And it worked because, the term was less loaded, and other folks had even used it before that. But the idea was basically to describe what was occurring, but without all the baggage. And when you think about it, unidentified aerial phenomena is actually broader and more representative of what's being seen, especially today. So like today, people report a lot of different things, not just triangles, not just saucers, but triangles and square ships and rectangular. And then another big thing that's being reported frequently now are orbs and, different forms of light displays and, spirals in the sky and all of these things. And you honestly can't say they're an object. You can't say, it's a flying object, but what you can say is some sort of unidentified phenomena that occurs in the air. So actually, there's a lot of good reason to use that. Now, I'll say, personally, I have the nostalgic appreciation of UFO, and depending on my audience, I'll either use the term UAP or UFO, and it just depends on who I'm talking to and the context of the conversation. But I don't disparage UFO. And I appreciate having UAP as a term that can be used that's much less loaded. So, and I think we're all seeing that being frequently used now in the mainstream media, now that they're beginning to take the topic more seriously. And I've noticed that whether it's Fox News or MSNBC or even a lot of the online folks and even members of the UFO community using UAP because the fact that it is less loaded. And I think that's why it's catching on. And again, I think it's even more accurate and representative of what we're seeing out there today.
Well, that brings me forward. I'll just go into this right now. I was going to save it for a little bit later, but there's a big initiative taking place over on Twitter called the Big Phone Home. I'm not sure who started that movement. Are you familiar with that term or with that?
Actually, no, I hadn't heard that. I'm surprised because, I usually check Twitter frequently, but no, I had not heard that. The Big Phone Home, huh?
Yeah, it is.
So
It is getting some traction. There's a few people that have been talking about it, and so some broad strokes for what the initiative is. They're encouraging everybody interested in the UFO topic on April 26th to call your congressman, call your representatives, and apply pressure on them to bring forward transparency and to also push forward the idea of adopting the term UAP versus the UFO term. So it's kind of got a dual agenda, I guess would be the right term. But it is a growing movement. So within about a little close to 2 months, April 26th is when they're really making a heavy push to get everybody to call in, flood the phone lines, write letters to your congressional leaders, and let people know that this is something that's interesting to the public. We want more information to be released from the government, and people are really getting more serious about this topic. And like you said, from the media to the representatives in Congress that are taking the topic seriously, to the military, which is being a little bit more transparent about it. I wouldn't say that they've gone full disclosure, but they have confirmed that there are some type of flying craft that we don't know what they are, and it's not ours. So the more pressure that the public puts on the government to release the information and bring forward the data, the more opportunity there will be for this information to come out and become public.
That sounds good. I mean, I'd support that. That's a good effort, and it kind of even dovetails with what's going on now with that Senate bill that was proposed by Marco Rubio, the formation of the UAP task force, and the bill to have the DoD make a public report on governmental agencies' research on UFOs. And I think that would be due out. It was supposed to be 180 days after the passage of the bill. And
Yeah.
I think it makes it for like the end of June. So yeah, that pressure in April kind of dovetails with the June release of the port. And we'll see what happens, see what we get.
Yeah, and that was something else that I had on the list to talk to you about. So we'll get into that a little bit more deeply. But before we do that, you are not only an investigator and an active representative of the MUFON organization, but you're also an activist, a UFO activist, trying to bring the information to the public. I would consider you an activist. I don't know if you consider yourself that or not, but you're doing public speaking engagements. You've written a book
Yeah.
about it to educate
Hmm.
the public about the topic. Um, in my mind, that's what an activist would do. As
Sure.
an activist, how could you encourage other people, and what could they do to become more involved in the topic? And we're talking about people that may have just a passing interest, all the way
Hmm.
up to somebody who has maybe had some experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is sort of the purpose of the book that I had written, in that um, because the taboo on talking about UFOs is lifting, at least in various stages of it, in particular since 2017 when the TTSA was able to release those three gun camera footage videos and the media started taking it serious. One of the things I began to notice and observe was that, you know, because of the military sort of acknowledging the reality of UFOs and the congressional interest and the mainstream media now treating it as a serious topic, right? There wasn't always the X-Files music and giggling when they talked about a UFO sighting. Now it's taken seriously. And I think because of that, there's millions of people out there that do have an interest in UFOs, but never pursued it or said much about it because of the ridicule factor. I don't know what my mom and dad would think, or I don't know what my wife would think, or I don't want anyone at work to know, and that kind of a thing. But there's a lot of reasons I think that has lifted, and I think it let's talk big picture, like the United States is becoming less and less Christian dominated, for example. There's a lot of different folks coming and bringing their religions and their cultures and different viewpoints, and it's we're the melting pot, right? And so what was once a dominant thing is less dominant, and then things like the discovery of exoplanets from a scientific perspective. I think that's had a big impact on the consciousness of society, being able to accept the possibility of life elsewhere. And then I'll even give props to shows like Ancient Aliens, where they, you know, we're all taught a specific history, but and it's taught as though it's pure fact, but in reality, there's a lot of supposition that went into, recording our history, and that they're providing alternative ideas, and I think that has also caused people to think a little bit more outside the box. So a combination of all of those things, I think society is kind of ripe for new ideas and new thinking, and now even scientists will say, yeah, the possibility of life is, or of there not being life, is like near zero elsewhere in the universe, and so that is a sea change. I mean, that's a huge 180 from as little as 15 years ago. But in the particular, the last 3 years or so, I felt like it's really become quite a ubiquitous topic, and people who wouldn't normally consider getting involved are. And so when I wrote the book, it was really for those people who want to learn more, get dip their toe in the waters, but to help them avoid falling down certain rabbit holes that can happen with ufology and all the kind of tangent stuff that goes with it. And so to me, the purpose of the book was to help them to go from point A to point B, understand the big issues that are related to ufology, the political science of it, down to, what's good information and definition of terms like UAP and UFO, and the scientific process and how we apply that, and, the cover up. And then I talk about, like some of the big classic cases that have been recorded for us throughout history, and why they're classic and what's good about them. And, the strength of evidence in one case may be different in another. You might have strong witness testimony in one, you might have great photographic evidence in one, or you might have physical evidence in another. In all these cases, there's a reason they're classic, is because they're very important, and people need to get acquainted with those. So yeah, I think that the whole issue is really society is changing. And yes, I do feel like an activist in that regard. And, it's just my goal too, when you think about it, the, excuse me, the older generation of UFO researchers is really dying away. And I mean that quite literally. And, I'm hoping to spurn the interest of a younger generation of people to kind of pick up that mantle and run with it and keep this thing going, because we've seen more progress in the last 3 or 4 years than the prior 50 years. And so I think it's a really important thing. And that's what little contribution I can make. I consumed information and knowledge, but then I'm like, well, what am I going to do with it? I want to apply it. I want to participate. I want to help. And so that's why I'm sitting here today, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you said a lot of important things, and I'd like to just touch on a couple of those things and expound on some of them. So, for starters, if somebody's interested in learning more about the topic, start out small, read some books, watch some videos, but be careful of what you're consuming and how much of the information out there. Be aware of how much of the information out there is actually false, because there's a ton of disinformation. So if you find yourself falling into an area that's this term I heard from a fellow MUFON. He's actually a member of the board of directors, Tom Whitmore. You familiar with him? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, he gave me this. He gave me this term, a fog of confusion, which is what people find themselves in when they start looking at all the information that's available out there, because there's so much confusing information, there's so much direct false information, and then there is some real good information that people actually can learn and use and do something with. You kind of have to figure out what that is, but you don't have to do that on your own. You could reach out to people in MUFON. Each state has their own chapter, and I think most countries have their own national chapters as well. MUFON is a great resource for people to turn to make sure that they're getting the correct information and not falling into the rabbit holes like you suggested. There's also organizations. Sorry, but we're going to say.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, it's kind of like wheat and chaff, when it comes to information, and you got to sort through it. And I think one of the biggest things to help people is if you research something, multi-source it, because you're always going to have a wide array of opinions when it comes to UFO things. Some people are on the debunkery spectrum, some are on the true believer side, and then you have skeptical people in the middle, and all of that's fine. But if you get locked into one source or one topic, that's where you can kind of get sucked into something. So that's just my recommendation. You hit the nail on the head. Read some books, watch different videos, get on Facebook, get into some groups, that are UFO topic, and you're going to see, it's policed by people, right? The utter nonsense kind of gets filtered out and that kind of thing. But in fact, again, that's a chapter in my book. I talk very much about, weeding out the junk, and, you have to be careful on these channels, say like on YouTube and stuff, that, they're making money off your clicks, and they're going to be sensationalistic, and that's their driver, not necessarily truth, but clicks and things like that. So, it's nothing, it's no big secret, but, it boils down to as reputable sources as you can get, and multi-source, so that you can really get a well-rounded view.
Even I'm a sucker for a great story. I'll sit and listen to a story that may or may not be true, but whether or not I believe that, I'll usually keep my opinion to myself. I'll reserve judgment, and because I don't want to disparage anybody, I don't want to disbelieve anybody, especially in public. But there are ways you can fact check certain things that people are saying, and I suggest that anybody who's interested in this topic to make sure that you find the resources that are going to allow you to fact check these claims, and especially these really big claims that some people are making. I'm not going to name names or even detail any of the information that's out there, but there's a lot of disinformation out there. Some of the legitimate organizations besides MUFON that I'm really trying to help people become aware of is the SkyHub platform, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yep.
And I don't want to get too much into it because I've talked about that a lot on the channel. But it is a nonprofit organization. They're building a tracking system that individuals can mount in a static location. And I've got a friend here in Las Vegas who has actually mounted one of those units to his vehicle. So he's made a mobile unit out of it. And
nice.
Yeah, that's Jeremy McGowan. I'm not sure if you know him or not. But
I've seen him out there in Facebook land. Yeah.
Yeah, he's becoming really active in the community. I would consider him an activist as well. And he's doing some really good work, some really important work, trying to educate the public and bring more awareness to the topic. Also, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies is a group of scientists that use scientific rigor to investigate and study cases that they've studied some cases that I had not even heard of. The Aguadilla incident.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic
case.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, it is.
And they spent years, and there's other cases that they've also studied, but they spend years studying these cases, writing up academic level papers, submitting them for peer review, and they're really making a strong movement towards bringing legitimacy to the topic as well. There's other organizations out there. Those are just a couple. Those are a couple that I've had contact with, and I'm all about if there's an organization or individuals that are out there that are really moving the, I guess I don't watch football, but it's an easy term to use. Moving that, that football closer to the end zone. Then I'm all about letting people know about who those people are. Now,
yeah, that's terrific.
Let's kind of jump back to updating, because we really got way ahead of ourselves. At least I did. I got way ahead of myself. I wanted to get an update from you about how things have been going in your area, and then I want to talk about the new project that you and Jason McClellan have started up, because that's a really cool project. So first of all, give me an update how things are going out in Arizona as far as the UAP phenomena, and just kind of an overview.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly had a very busy year, and I'll speak more in terms of 2020. Um, and what's interesting is when COVID kicked in and the nation started to stay at home, I was curious as how that would affect the number of reports, UFO reports received, and we tracked it for the first 3 months. So that was March, April, and May, and from the prior year of 2019, um, the reports as much as doubled the number of reports coming in. So it's been a very active year, but the question is why, and so you kind of try and figure that out. Well, people are at home more, um, and maybe they have more time to just be sitting around doing nothing, looking at the stars or whatever it may be. That might be part of it. And that trend had continued really throughout 2020. I thought that was really fascinating. And so the type of cases that you typically get, are a lot of those lights in the sky kind of cases. But we even seen an increase in things like, abduction cases or contact cases or sighting of entity cases, and just a little bit of everything. And so I thought that was really fascinating. And what I'll be real curious about is to see what happens once we all get back active again nationally, and we're going to work and taking the kids to school, and doing all the things we do and all the recreation and all of that stuff. It'll be interesting to see, because just because you have a number of reports, it doesn't mean that represents the number of sightings, right? In other words, 10 people might have a sighting, but only one or two make a report. So, and people often say, maybe it's 1/10. So if we have 10,000 reports in a year, it's really 100,000 sightings. I don't know that we can prove that, but that's sort of the gut feeling that a lot have. And I know Cheryl Costa has put together really fantastic book that is a statistical representation of UFO sightings, and she's also made that very same observation. So it kind of supports that. So that's been really pretty fascinating in my mind, and it's just kept us really busy.
One of the things that I attended, I attend the Nevada MUFON Zoom meetings that we've been having. I'm not a member of the MUFON organization myself, but I do. I'm a I'm a advocate for the company, or for the group, for the organization. It's not a company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an advocate for them, and I'm a participant in their meetings. I've invited a couple of guests to speak at their Zoom meetings, and I just think it's a really good organization. One of the things that I have asked repeatedly, and it's it's there's it seems to be like a lack of information coming out of countries that, like Russia or China or even India. There's limited information coming out of those countries, and h- how could like you and I sitting here talking and trying to figure out the problems in the entire world. Um, how could we improve relationships on that level so that we can get more information, and they could get more information about this particular topic? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, we kind of are U.S. centric in our thinking, and we kind of think that the rest of the world is like us, but in fact, it's not. And many of those other countries are much more open about the UFO topic, have been, and some of those countries even have official UFO programs within their government. So France has had Guy Pan for decades. Um, and Brazil has SIFA, And there are other countries that have formal UFO organizations. So it tells us a couple things. One, these things are experienced worldwide, right? The UFO phenomena is not unique to the U.S., nor is it unique to just, developed countries. I mean, there are reports from all over every continent. And it's handled differently. It's viewed differently. We're the Western world. We're very physical and material centric, where other nations they're not that way, and so the topic is much more easily accepted and discussed. But maybe it's not as formalized and as we have it here in the U.S. And so I think, as you mentioned, there. MUFON does have chapters, all across the world. But, look at the population of China or of India, billions, you're talking billions of people, and you probably are talking thousands of people in any kind of coordinated effort regarding UFOs in those nations. So that's formidable. And, the challenge is really to communicate that information and get it out. But I will say this: most nations are probably, this is a speculation on my part, most nations are probably following the lead of the United States when it comes to that topic. So the U.S. has squashed it for 75 years, and most other countries probably have followed suit. Now, I think if we see a wider, more formal disclosure or a treatment of this topic in the public eye in a positive way, it may affect other nations. And I think recently Japan announced that it was forming a formal UFO investigation group within its military. So I think that's a reflection of what's happening. And so this is the uncontrolled part of any kind of disclosure is, it's very organic and it's almost like a brush fire. You light the match and then pretty soon that thing's a forest fire. And I think maybe we're seeing that now. We're in the early parts of it. Again, just my opinion, but I think when you look at the example of Japan, you can already see, the U.S. is starting to take it a little more serious. We'll be more public in our demonstrating the interest in it.
Somebody recently, or I think it was earlier today on Twitter, posted something about what if, and this is U.S. centric, but what if the Space Force comes out with information about UAP before the Air Force does? And my reply to that, it's just a speculative question.
Yeah.
It's all in fun. But my response to that was, that would be great if that happened, because competition is good for business, right? If one branch starts talking about it, the other branches are, like you just said, they're going to come along and start talking about it as well. Because, I mean, the sooner that we could shake off this stigmatism about the topic, and people can become more comfortable talking about it, the sooner that the information is going to be made more readily available to people.
Yeah. And now, to your point, just think for a moment that the Air Force was driving that bus for the last 75 years, right? Project Blue Book and all of that. But interestingly, who came out, what military branch came out in 2017 and is now taking the lead? Yeah. Interesting, right? Why
very interesting.
Why have we not heard a single peep out of the Air Force? Well, they probably are pretty darn glad to just pass this off to the Navy, right? But regarding Space Force, why did the Space Force just sort of pop up in the last couple of years? Don't know. Again, speculative, but there's got to be a reason. Is it related to UFOs in any way? I don't know. But it's just interesting that, what's that game? You have the 3 shells and the little pea under it, and the guy, slides them around, and you try and, watch where the pea is and guess which nut shell it's under. I mean, it almost feels like that a little bit, but who knows? I mean, maybe what we're seeing is what it appears to be, but maybe there's other things going on that we're not aware of, and time will tell.
True. Yeah, very true. So let's lighten up the topic a little bit, because that's, I mean, that's important information. We need to talk about that. But I like to look at a lighter side of this topic, because there is some fun that you can have. And you and your friend Jason McClellan, who is an awesome dude, he's been on the podcast with me. We talked science fiction for about an hour or two, and I
Nice.
really got to know him. Really like him a lot. He's a good guy. But you
He
guys
sure
started
is.
a new project recently, and again, it takes a look at in a serious way, but you take a look at the lighter side of the UFO UAP topic. Can you talk about that a little
Hmm.
bit?
Yeah. So the podcast, we're calling it Old Fashioned UFOs, and Jason and I share an appreciation for bourbon. And one of the most common drinks that's made with bourbon is called an old fashioned. And we thought we would kind of incorporate that with our consideration each month of a different classic old fashioned UFO case. And so we talk about, that. And we review the case, we summarize the case, and then we talk about its implications, and what's good about it, what's not good about it, and how it's been interpreted, and maybe it needs to be reinterpreted now because we have different technology, and we have a different science, and we have more participation, and the taboo's lifting, and more people are getting involved, and you can look back on that case and its evidence and maybe see it through a different lens, and perhaps find something new with it. But even if you don't, those cases are really important because they're like a foundation, for what's occurring even now. And you can look back there and look at patterns and, things that happen compared to what's happening today, find correlations or differences, and then why are they different, and so forth. So, but yeah, we like to have a little fun too, a little bit of banter, because heck, UFOs are just flat out fun. The whole topic is a blast. And I definitely am on the serious side most of the time. I'm fairly skeptical, and the longer I'm involved, the more skeptical I am. Not skeptical in terms of whether it's real or not. I know for a fact that there's a real phenomena. In fact, everyone knows that there's a real phenomena because the Navy has come out and said it, for example. Congress is involved. There's been decades of people talking about their experiences. There has been plenty of evidence, photographic, video, radar, physical evidence, chemical, radiological. I could go on and on. So there's a very serious side to it. But on the other hand, hey, it's just flat out fun. You can see this guy over my shoulder right here, right? Right
Mm-hmm.
there. My little granddaughters just love it. They eat it up, and they have alien lunch bags, and I have alien stickers here and there, and even in my workplace. And if somebody wants to poke fun and stuff, yeah, go ahead. I have fun with that. You can you can't take yourself so seriously. You got to have, and I guess this is an approach to all areas of life, but even with ufology, yeah, there's definitely a giggle factor there, and there are people who do some pretty funny things, and so it's just good to have a sense of humor to lighten it, and but when it's time to get serious, just like
Yeah.
anything in life.
And there's a difference between having fun with the information, the content, having a good time talking about it. You can see the chemistry between you guys. You can tell that you guys are good friends, longtime good friends,
Yeah.
and it's cool to see that. And then you guys are talking about a super interesting topic. You're not joking about the information. You're not making
Yeah.
fun of the topic
Oh,
in any way. You
no.
guys are just having a lighthearted discussion about a serious topic, and it's an awesome show. I really
Yeah.
hats off to you guys for
Thanks.
that. And everything Jason does seems to turn to gold in my mind. I mean, I
Yeah,
think everything he's doing is awesome.
he's a
Um,
pro, man. He's a sharp guy.
yeah, he is.
Yeah,
He is a sharp
he's my
guy.
bud.
Uh, Now you mentioned when in our pre conversation before we started the live stream, you mentioned that you have also been involved in another project that you just submitted for to an organization in your area. That you go ahead and talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is really cool. So there's Phoenix is a large metro area, and so there are other little cities around it, Mesa and Tempe, and there's one called Chandler, Arizona, and the Chandler public library system is actually having a UFO week, and as a result of that, starting next week, 4 or 5 of us from MUFON are putting together some content and presentations for that week. And the one I prepared is on Travis Walton. And Travis, actually, I'm acquainted with Travis. In October 2020, we had our annual MUFON camping trip up in the White Mountains, which is where Travis Walton had his experience. Travis came to the camping trip, and we observed COVID protocols. No one got sick. It was very good. And we had a chance to hang out and talk and so forth. And then in November at the Phoenix MUFON meeting, we were able to have one in November. And I interviewed him on the stage. And it was really terrific to be able to sit there with him, for a couple hours and just really, pick his brain and ask him, questions, and the audience were, asking him questions and everything. It was just so informative, and you really got to see his personality, and what I like about it is the genuine emotion, that he displays when he's talking. And I'm not saying he's over emotional, but there are points where, you can tell he's uncomfortable and a little stressed about it. And, rightly so. So anyways, I put a presentation together for the Chandler Library on Travis, for a couple of reasons. One is that incident occurred right here in Arizona. And along with the Phoenix Lights case, those two are of particular interest to me because, they're in my home. They occurred here. But in addition, they're both very fascinating and interesting cases for different reasons. And so like the case with Travis Walton, for example, I guess I could maybe quickly give you about a summary of what happened to him in the case, in case
Please.
any of your listeners are interested. Yeah. So in November of 1975, he was 21 years old, excuse me. And he was part of a logging crew, a total of 7 guys. And they were working a contract to thin the forest. Arizona has one of the largest stands of ponderosa pines in the world, and they had a logging contract to thin the forest because they get heavy snows in the winter, and then we have monsoon season. We'll get a lot of rains. Well, a lot of brush builds up there, and in fact, several years ago, we had a huge fire and lost 500,000 acres of forest, which was just horrendous. So the work that they were doing was very important, but they were up there. They had just completed a long day's work, and the location they were at is pretty remote, deep in the forest, but there are logging roads that, get you there, and you can go there today, in fact, still. And they, packed everything up for the day. They were in a crew cab truck, and they all piled in, and they're heading home, and it was just at sunset or a little bit after. It was dark, and they saw a light kind of in the distance filtering through the trees. And as they got closer and closer, they thought, oh, maybe it's the sunset, maybe there's a fire, maybe there's a plane crash, but the closer they got, the more nervous they got because it was apparently something strange. And they go around the clearing, and lo and behold, right in front of them I'm just going to say it, was a flying saucer, hovering 10 or 15 feet off the ground, 20, 30 foot in diameter. And they stopped the truck. Travis was in the passenger side. And for whatever reason, he decides to get out and start walking towards it, get a closer look, maybe maybe his testosterone was talking. And the guys were yelling at him and screaming because they started really panicking. They did. They were terrified. And as he approached, the object had been making a low humming noise kind of a thing. And as he approached, it started to wobble and made different noises. And it looked like it was spooling up to take off kind of a thing. And he got what looked like too close, and a blue beam, came from underneath the craft and struck him, and it literally sent him 10 feet back in the air, and he lands in a crumpled little pile. And the guys just freak out. They just panic. And so they take off, and they just take off and leave Travis. And they go a mile or two down the road. They kind of gain some composure. They stop, and they realize, look, we got to go back and get him. So they go back, but when they go back, he's gone. So they searched for him thinking maybe, first of all, they really thought he was dead. I mean, they did. And when he wasn't there, that shocked them. But then they thought, okay, maybe he was stunned and now he's wandering around. And so they searched, called for him and couldn't find him. So it ends up, he's gone for 5 days. The crew goes back into town, reports it to the sheriff, to their credit, and it just starts a firestorm from police investigation to media to the community. Everybody's up in arms about this. And of course, there's accusations that they murdered him, buried the body, or that this was a hoax and he's holed up in some cabin or whatever. Well, for 5 days, it was one of the largest manhunts or, not a rescue, but search and rescue operations in Arizona history up until that time. And, they ended up not finding him. And then on that 5th day, he appears, face down in the highway right near some a phone booth and stuff. And so they clearly had, placed him in a place where he could be found and safe, because too, at the time, it was below freezing. He could have died of exposure. So there were a lot of reasons why ultimately the investigation was inconclusive. And, this is in spite of being attacked by the media, attacked by the likes of Phil Klass, other debunkers, but what's really unique about this case is you had a total of 7 eyewitnesses to an abduction. And those witnesses all passed multiple polygraph tests in support of that, which is unbelievable, right? For an investigator, I get one witness 90% of the time. When you get 2 witnesses, it's like, whoa, wow, this is exciting, because, 2 witnesses really can help establish the facts of something. Well, you had 7, including Travis. So that's a really big deal, and a unique thing. First of all, that he was abducted and brought back, and then that there were witnesses to that abduction, and that they, were clearly truthful in what they were reporting. And so, and then he goes into describing later, as his memory comes back, what he experienced inside the ship and all that stuff. But as a result, they made a movie called A Fire in the Sky, and it's a Hollywood movie, and it's not entirely accurate. He did participate. And then he wrote a wonderful book called the same title, A Fire in the Sky, which I highly recommend people read. And to me, as an investigator, the most important thing when you research or investigate, you need to talk to the person who was there. And Travis was there. And so, to me, that's a primary source of information. But you should also multi-source, as I was talking about earlier. There have been reputable people who have investigated that case and researched it. You can Google any of that, and you can really get a good idea or picture of all the varying opinions on that case. But the bottom line is, to me, that case was a case study not only in UFOs, but in the law enforcement reaction, the reaction of the community, the reaction of media. It went from local to national to international. And in fact, Travis now has visited many countries, and he's welcomed and treated respectfully, and to share his story and stuff. So, it's really been just so interesting to talk to him and to get into the level of detail. These are the things that make you, like I said, I from my experience speaking with him personally, reading his book, other research, I'm of the opinion that he's being truthful. But like I always say, look, Travis and those 6 other guys, they know what happened. They know it. The rest of us, we don't know. We're
That's
just
right.
left to make a decision based on the evidence, which is frustrating. But on the other hand, like we were talking about earlier, you have to make these judgments based on facts and evidence, and it's worth the dig. I highly encourage people, do the research, read about it, watch documentaries, do all those things, because you will get educated. And that, to me, that's the most important thing. And if going back to that activist type of thinking, is it's all about education. So, I highly recommend folks do that.
It seems like Arizona has long been a hot spot for UFO activity. I mean, if you go back to the 1950s, I've looked into a case of a crash in Kingman, Arizona. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
1953. There
Yep.
was a crash in Kingman,
53.
Arizona. Yeah. And then you have the Travis Walton incident. You have the Kingman Lights. Those are 3 pretty significant cases.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got Sedona, Arizona with, do you know Melinda Leslie?
I
She has
do.
she
Mm-hmm.
has a UFO tour company that she takes people out, and almost every time she goes out using night vision goggles, people are able to see craft. Well, not every night they see craft, but every night they see something in the skies that's
Unusual.
not explainable.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
what is it about Arizona? And first of all, somebody asked about the sighting or the incident with Travis Walton. Where exactly? What part of Arizona was that in?
Yeah, it's called the White Mountains. It's in the northeastern part of the state, pretty near the border of New Mexico. The specific area is called Turkey Springs, and there, that part of Arizona, there's lots of little mountain towns. So, like my father-in-law actually lives in Show Low, and so I've been going there for 40 years. So I'm really familiar with the area. Now, where he was abducted is, obviously a remote area, but it's near where he was dropped off, a little town called Heber. Um, so if somebody wants to kind of, map this out, you could look at towns: Heber, Overgard, Forest Lakes, Sholo. It's all in that area, and it's high altitude, 6,000 plus feet, and heavily forested.
Uh, the how far away was that town that he found himself in after he had been abducted? How far was that from where he actually lived?
I did ask him that, and I'm trying to think if it was 30 miles, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was remote enough that it took more like an hour plus to get there, because on a logging road, and you're only going a few miles an hour, kind of a thing. But and to your point about Arizona, you know um it's a really great question, and I think there's sightings in every state, and what makes a state a hot spot, I'm not sure. But Arizona as a state rates in like about the top 5 every month. So you have the granddaddy of all is California, and then New York's pretty big, and Florida and Texas and Arizona. And I think the things that are common with those are larger populations, or good weather, people might just be out more and are seeing things just because of sheer proximity. There seems to be a lot of desert activity in UFOs over deserts. I don't know why. A good share of the California sightings are in the desert part of California, Arizona, for example. And so I don't know what it is. There's also things to consider like nuclear power plants. We have one right here, right outside of Phoenix, Palo Verde. It's one of the biggest in the world. There's military bases. Yuma has a big Marine training center, and they test a lot of stuff there. So, but it's not just unique to Arizona. I think every state has those sorts of things, right? But maybe it's just the sheer fact that we're out a lot in Arizona. Like Sedona is a hot spot because it's, some people feel it's a vortex for different energy and things like that. But, if you've ever been here, the skies they're dark. You don't have tall forests in the good share of the state blocking your view. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But I'll tell you, I certainly love living here. And I live outside of Phoenix a little bit. My ranch is really dark. And every single night I'm out there looking. And just like Melinda and her efforts up there, you have a military grade night vision. Oh my gosh. What you can see is kind of mind-blowing, and you do see things that are hard to explain. I don't know what they are, but they're interesting. They don't go in a straight line. So that makes you wonder, it's not a satellite nor an airplane. How can a lighted object move in the way it does? That's highly unusual. But, someday we'll hopefully crack the case and find out what's going on.
I mean, for example, satellites don't make right angle turns. And if you're seeing
exactly.
objects in the sky that's doing that, and they're up high enough that they're not a plane, and planes don't make 90-degree right angle turns. They take a long time to make a turn in the sky. So yeah, there's definitely stuff out there that is not easily explained. We got a couple of listener questions. How much time do you have tonight, Shane? I mean, I don't want to keep you on too late.
Let's roll. It's Saturday night. I'm already past my bedtime. Let's rock and roll.
Cool. So Renee asks, when was the first documented case of sightings?
Ooh, well, actually, some people feel like back in the Bible, like the book of Ezekiel, and what he described there could potentially be. And there have been many things throughout history that have been documented. For example, in the 1500s, the Nuremberg carving, and it's a wood carving, and it depicts this battle in the sky of all these objects and stuff. But in a more modern sense, certainly in the 1890s, there was this flap or wave of sightings of these so-called airships across the U.S. And about that period of time was the classic case of the 1897 Aurora, Texas crash UFO, where it allegedly, crashed on Dr. Proctor's property, hit his windmill, and debris was scattered, and the town folks all went out there and looked at it, acknowledged it. They gathered up the stuff. They found them and they buried them in the cemetery. I mean, there's a long story with that. That was the first thing we covered on Old Fashioned UFOs. But so that's definitely a well-documented case. I mean, it was in the newspaper and everything. And then, during World War II, we know the Foo Fighters were reported, and these were, orb-like objects, lighted balls that would seem to interact with the aircraft in flight. And the it was not only experienced by the Americans, but also by the Germans and the Japanese and others. So at first they thought, oh, it was a German secret weapon or it was a U.S. secret weapon. But, and really since that time, no one's ever explained them, which I think is just kind of crazy. So that was pretty prominent. And then in the early 40s, there was the Cape Girardeau, Mississippi crash case. In 1942, the Battle of Los Angeles, that case, and the very prominent picture where all those, searchlights were crossed and focused on a UFO, and they got 1,400 rounds of artillery at it and all this stuff, and so from that period on, I think most people will say that the modern UFO phenomena kicked off really with the Kenneth Arnold sighting in Washington State in 1947, which happened to be only a couple weeks before Roswell. So, and actually before that, there was a Maury Island, Washington incident where a couple UFOs, donut-shaped, were right above a fishing boat. They dropped some slag or something from them, hit the boat. I think it broke the arm of one of the workers, killed the dog, that kind of thing. And that was investigated by the U.S. Air Force. And then a few weeks later, Kenneth Arnold had his sighting of the 9 echelon-shaped objects. And that one got a lot of attention in the media at the time. And that one's usually credited with the term flying saucer. Right. It wasn't Kenneth Arnold who coined it, and it wasn't the first reporter that talked to him, but just somewhere in the media at some point, no one's really sure, that term started getting used, and the rest is history. And then, of course, a few days later, there was an incident right here in Arizona, and it was in 1947, June as well, or it might have been July 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, somewhere in there, only a day or two before Roswell. And this object was sighted, and a photo was taken. And most people have probably seen the picture of it, but it's called the William Rhodes incident. And that was the name of the man. He was a surveyor, and he was surveying actually just 6 miles from my house. And he saw this UFO, and he got 2 pictures of it. And so, look that one up. That's pretty cool. And so I just think it's interesting. That week before Roswell, you had Maury Island, then you had Kenneth Arnold, and then you had the William Rhodes sighting, and then you had the Roswell crash. The cork got, taken out of the bottle for some reason here in the U.S. in June or July of 1947. So to answer Renee's question, I would say largely that's probably what most people would think of as the beginning of the UFO phenomena. But I think it really started much, much longer ago. And it just, our media there wasn't the media that we have now to make it known.
Well, and just to add to that, I would consider the journals of ship captains to be public record. And I don't know exactly, but in the 14 and 1500s, a lot of the ship captains that were coming over from Europe to the America were having weird sightings across the ocean. I think Christopher Columbus is even quoted as saying he saw some strange stuff in the sky.
Absolutely, Christopher Columbus did, and it was recorded in his ship log. And I've seen stories on that where they had seen lighted objects coming up out of the water and going up into the sky and so forth. So, I mean, can you imagine that? That's pretty darn hard to explain. They had no technology whatsoever, no natural phenomena that would explain that. So, yeah, that's fascinating.
Right. Let's see what we've got here. ERRT Radio asks, do you still have the same passion, or has it changed over the years?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I absolutely love it. I'm having the time of my life. What has changed for me, and I think I mentioned it earlier, was that I'm getting more skeptical. I need to explain that. The more I investigate and the more I learn how people can mistake other things for a sighting, um, I began to realize that, the majority of sightings are explainable. So just let me give you an example. Like, first of all, when it comes to information that we see, there's misinformation, right? Misinformation is kind of accidental, just something got explained incorrectly. Disinformation is different. Disinformation is somebody intentionally misleading people by providing false information as though it's correct. And then, misidentification is the biggest factor. And the way that happens is, people will find themselves in a situation that they're not familiar with, and something will happen. And it's that, unfamiliarity that can make you misinterpret what you're seeing or hearing or whatever the case may be. And I think that happens a lot. So you just, in one circumstance, what you might interpret as an airplane, in another circumstance, you might not interpret it as an airplane, even though it is, just because of the circumstances that you're in. And I don't mean just, drinking or being high or something like that, but just, something is off, you're off, the circumstance you're in, and that can lead to a lot of misidentification. Plus, there is just weird, eerie stuff that happens all the time, all around us, and we don't even pay attention or notice it. But in the moment that we do, it can catch us off guard. And it's not a criticism. It's not somebody lacks intelligence or ability or, skills or anything. No, it can happen to any of us. I've seen some things and I'm like, I had to sit there and watch it for quite a while until I figured out what it was, but it had me going, even as an experienced investigator. So, but, to answer his question, no, I'm as much or more enthusiastic. I'm more enthusiastic because, again, one thing I say about ufology, it's not just about the destination. It's if you're interested in this just because you want to find out what it is, which I do, and that's good. But if that's all there is to your interest, boy, you're probably going to be disappointed, right? We've been at this 75 years and nobody knows yet. Now, I'm hopeful that we're going to know something in my lifetime, but maybe not. But it's a cliche, but it's the journey too. That I love the journey. I love researching, investigating this. I love, talking to other people who have the interest. I mean, this is fun. This is interesting. Look, we're you and I are doing this, and people are watching and listening. I mean, that is freaking cool. And so, yeah, I have a lot of enthusiasm for it. I love it. But, I am learning and changing a little bit. And, social media, I struggle with that because, it's this forum or platform where anybody can say anything and there's really no consequence to it. There's not much accountability. And, sometimes that gets a little bit old, But that being said, love it, love the topic, love the people. I always say UFOs is really about people. And it really is. It's about our reaction to it. We don't even know what it is. We don't know who it is. But we certainly have a reaction to it. And I find that interesting and fascinating. So, yeah, I'm skeptical in the sense that, the number of reports and what's reported, even though it's increasing, I'm not willing to say it's because there's more aliens here. I think it's more, more people are looking and interested, but, it's easy to be fooled. That's not the right word. To misinterpret. It just really is. And that's the common thing that happens. So, when we investigate, you go through certain checklists sort of things, you work, it's like a process of elimination. What's the most, obvious and logical excuse, and you go all the way down until what you're left with is no explanation. That's an unknown. So it's a process, and I love the process.
That's such a huge statement that you made right there. Is that, and this is true in any walk in life. Is that um, the journey is just as important, and in some cases more important than the destination.
Mhm.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm looking for answers. That's one of the things that I do with my podcast. I get to talk to people, hear different perspectives, learn new information from people, and I
Yes.
have questions answered that I didn't even know I had. I'm looking for the bigger the answers to the bigger questions, but along the way, I'm getting questions answered that I didn't even know I had. And that journey in
Mm.
itself is such an interesting, enlightening journey that not to, it's like you're walking through the Grand Canyon to get to a river so you can go fishing, right? And
Yeah.
you're not looking at the beautiful landscape that you're going through to get there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's going to
Great.
ignore the the beauty of the environment that you're in just to get to the destination? No, you're going to take your time. You're going to look around and enjoy the scenery. It's the same thing with the journey in ufology or in business or in any other endeavor that you undertake in your
Mhm.
life. So that's why I
Yeah.
say that's such a huge statement, because that's something that I've long held that belief that it's more important to enjoy the small things and
Hmm.
really relish in those moments. So
Yeah. That's
good
a
point
great
on that.
illustration. Hmm.
Yeah, and I used a location from Arizona. I'm not even from Arizona.
That's right. Hey.
It's all
Sucking
about
up to the
Arizona tonight,
guest.
Shane. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Let's see. There was another question, in fact, about Arizona. So here we go. Um, what area would you say has the most sightings in Arizona?
Yeah, I would say we get the most reports from the areas between Phoenix and Tucson. Now we get them from all over, Sedona included. Um, but the area between Phoenix and Tucson, and I'm afraid to say the reason is because we have a huge amount of military activity, a huge amount. That part of the state is almost all solid MOAs, which is a military operating area. And you wouldn't think it to be true, but their MOAs are usually near metropolitan areas. You wouldn't think so. You'd think they'd be out in the middle of nowhere, but they're very near. And in fact, like on Wednesday evening at 8:30, there is training going on in some of these training areas that we often get reports about. They do like aerial refueling missions at night, and they turn all the lights off on the planes, and they have like this weird looking light bar that's like a 20-foot long or two 10-foot long horizontal bars with a series of colored lights that turn on and off until the pilot and the plane go up, go down, left, right, or whatever kind of thing. uh, or they do flare drops, which can be very interesting looking. And so again, that's illustrating how, again, you're out driving kind of in the middle of nowhere, maybe between Phoenix and Tucson. It's all dark, and you look off in the horizon, you see this, and you're like, whoa, and you pull over and watch it. Again, you're in a circumstance, you're not familiar with the area, you're doing something different, and you see something, and you just don't have all the reference points you do in your normal life, and you see that, and it's easy to make that conclusion. Man, that's really strange looking. So so that's just an example. But yeah, we get a lot of reports around this area, and a lot of time it's related to that military activity. However, I will say too, some of that comes up as unknowns because you can't explain it with military activity, and people will probably, logically conclude that they're interested in our military activity, so they're watching us, and they're here in this area. The Phoenix Lights itself, in that very area, but was clearly something much more than what the lame kind of explanation we got from the government about dropping flares. And we go to a whole discussion about flares, but you know, this area is very hot in terms of the number of reports, but we get them all over statewide.
You brought up a couple questions that I have in regards to that. Number one, if it's important that you said that even though those are military operating areas, not everything that is observed in those areas can be explained by military activity. With that, it brought up a question: how disappointed would you be if the government came out, and this would never happen? So this is speculation moment, okay?
Mhm.
But if the government came out and they said and definitively proved that UFOs has been a long-term hoax by the government, everything that you've seen is government technology, and here's the evidence to prove it. Now, would that be super disappointing to you, or would you be completely satisfied in your quest for answers?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think I would be disappointed because, you know, well, I always say I try to avoid being a believer in anything. I want to be a knower, right? But you can't help but have some sort of inkling that, you know, other life would be very interesting. And it would be kind of disappointing if that were the case. However, I have to say, even in this hypothetical, I just wouldn't buy it. There's too much proof and evidence to the contrary. Now, you could probably pick out certain cases where there definitely were hoaxes. I mean, perpetrated by the government. Look at what they did to Paul Benowitz.
Yes.
You know, Richard Doty,
Very tragic.
a Fosi. You know, they really jerked with that guy, and you know, he ultimately committed suicide because of it. So that's to me very, you know, that was a very bad situation. But yeah, there's just too much evidence that there's something way more going on here than any number of military test platforms or anything could answer. So, you know, yeah, I would be disappointed. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think if they did that, then you really have to look at what is their motivation for doing that, and you have to, like you said, you have to maintain that skepticism so that you don't, if you don't, so you don't fall for anything that is, you know, that you're given.
Yep.
Now, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about the legislation that.
Yeah.
Last time we talked, there was some legislation before Congress that got approved, and there was a couple things that happened out of that. There was the UAP task force was created, and there was a 180-day deadline put on the DoD to present basically what they know about the UAP phenomena. How realistic is the 180 days, and what do you think that report is going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, it's law, so they're going to have to meet the 180 days. But you know, so I guess this is the skeptic in me. And looking at the last 75 years of government behavior and their being transparent with UFO information, I expect very little from the report from that perspective. However, I could be wrong. And I think regardless of what comes out of it, it still will be of interest. And there will be things that we learn, even if it's just, you know, what organizations are there? You know, what organization did this data come from? And you have data. How did you get that data? You know, what is that data? How did you collect it? what was the, experience associated with that for that organization. I mean, even though, I certainly don't think they would come out and say, yep, yeah, they're real. Here's, Alien Bob, meet him. That's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to be disclosure in a very, big way, but there will definitely be information of interest. Could be really surprised. And they're supposed to have, the report is supposed to be for the public consumption, but they also cited that there can be a classified annex or addendum to it. So that already tells me, look, the really good stuff is going to be in the classified portion of that. The rest is going to be what's available to us. But like I said, I'm looking forward to it. I will be interested in it. I think we will learn some things from it, but based on history, I'm not holding my breath that, anything super meaningful is going to happen from it or will be related in there. But I think it's a very important step in this whole process. Excuse me. So I'm not trying to diminish it in any way. I'm really looking forward to it. But, I think we all just have to take a deep breath, not expect too much, and wait and see what we get.
Yeah, I think it was brought to pass because of a concerted effort by a few people. And that is just an illustration of how important it is that if you have a voice, if you have a platform, to talk to other people about this, but to also contact legislative or the people that write these bills, the Congress and the representatives that are supposedly your representative in Washington. So you can reach out to those people, you can talk to those people, and ask them and tell them what you want from them. If only a handful of people does that, that's at least getting the conversation started. If thousands of people do it, or even tens of thousands of people do it, then it's going to become a more of an immediate concern for Congress, and they're going to have to take action. So,
Yeah,
I mean, these are small
great.
steps, and the small steps that actually they could be, these could be considered huge steps, because in the last, since Project Blue Book, we haven't really seen this kind of activity, and that was back in the 60s, wasn't it? Project Blue Book.
Yeah, ended
So
in '69.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've seen this type of government interest, public interest, and acknowledgement of this topic. So it is, to be cautiously optimistic is a good way to be and to approach this topic. And then, man, just wait and see. But April 26th is that big phone home, where it's kind of a goofy name, in my opinion, but what they're trying to do behind the movement is to get everybody to write into their representative and call. I think it's a good effort.
Yeah, I mean, that's how our government works, right? That's how, I mean, whether it's UFOs or something else, that's
That
how
way,
you get
right?
action of your representatives. And yeah, I think that's really important. And I think it's very effective, because you look at, like, I don't mean poor, but I mean, Stephen Bassett has been a full-time lobbyist for the UFO topic for at least 10, 20 years. And,
Yeah.
he just, fantastic guy, fantastic work. But until there was this, push from people like Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and others, and it isn't just about them, it's about the situation and, all the things we already talked about, how our people in general, the public and others and scientists, and everyone's, wanting more transparency and want more information. So just created this environment where, Lou and Chris were able to make some headway in with Congress on that. But yeah, I think that's a really terrific idea, to everybody contact their representatives and say something about the topic, because that will move the meter for them. That is how they operate. So that's a terrific idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. There's another listener question. Besides state chapter websites, is there any other internet sites? Is that regarding MUFON, or are you talking about other resources besides the MUFON websites? Because each state chapter, not every state chapter has their own website, but there's definitely a national MUFON website, and then from there you can go to different pages for each of the states. Some of the states
Mm-hmm.
have specific Facebook pages or
Mm-hmm.
dedicated websites and those are usually the states with bigger, much
Right.
more active investigative teams. Which I know Nevada has a Facebook page. I don't know if they have their own website though for that, the Nevada
Yeah. Yeah. Phoenix
chapter.
has phoenixmufon.com. And Phoenix is a little unique in that we have uh, a speaker series where our director Stacy Wright has, a really great relationship with a lot of really prominent people in ufology. And so, I mean, we'll have, Richard Dolan and Nick Pope and Linda Moulton Howe, and you just name it. They come to Phoenix and they speak with us, and we go out and have lunch, and then we sit by a fire at night and, make a fun time of it. And so we post that information so that people know when and where, who's speaking, and that sort of thing. But yeah, not every state has a chapter. So, like, for example, in the very smaller, less populated states, there might be, maybe Illinois has one, and then, they have 2 or 3 other states lumped together with them, and they dispatch folks out, to investigate if necessary. So it's not like there's 50, state chapters or whatever, but all of the U.S. is covered by a chapter. So that's how that works. And so, yeah, MUFON.com is the national and international starting point. Certainly, that's the most informative and complex website regarding MUFON. And then various chapters can have their own.
What are some of the other non-MUFON associated websites that people could go to for legitimate? Now, we mentioned earlier that there's a couple of organizations, and they all have websites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The SCU, I think it's called explorescu.org or .com. I'm not sure what that is. That's a scientific coalition for UAP studies. Great website. Impeccable information on that website. Skyhub.org is a website that you could look at. What do you have any other suggestions? Websites that people can look at?
NARCAP. I like NARCAP, NARCAP.
Oh, that's right.
That's Dr. Richard Haynes and Ted Rowe. Their focus is on aviation reporting, and so they've been a safe place for pilots to make reports for at least a decade or more. Dr. Richard Haynes was a Apollo NASA guy, and Ted Rowe is the executive director, and they investigate and then publish the results of various air encounters, which is really important, I think, at least from a safety perspective. But they have some really good information, again, very much similar to the SCU. So they definitely have some interesting stuff there. And I think you can look at NUFORC, which is interesting. That's the National UFO Reporting Center. Peter Davenport has manned that for gosh, 20, 30 years. Um, and what they do is they take reports, they don't investigate, but it's pretty interesting. I reference them every case I get because one of the things I like to do is find out if there's been more than one report regarding a sighting. And it's kind of the whole two witness thing. And so I always check his website when I begin investigating a case to see if someone had made a report about what I'm investigating, but on that site. So that can be kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, there's really a ton of information out there. That's a great question, ERRT. I mean, because there is so much information that is hogwash. You can't trust it.
Mm-hmm.
But the sites that we're naming right here, I would stand behind these websites. I know some of these people myself personally. Shane knows some of these people personally. So you know, they're without a doubt good resources to look at and to start with anyway. And then from there
Yeah.
you'll find more information, more resources as you start to do your
Mm-hmm.
own research. And I mean, before you know it, you'll have a couple hundred websites that you use as reference. But
Yeah.
just be careful with of the information that's out there. That's one of the points that Shane made really really clearly early on. And it's always to maintaining that healthy skepticism is going to help you more than you can understand.
Yeah. So true. Calibrate your BS meter. That's what I like to
That's a good way to put it.
suggest.
Now let's talk a little bit about investigating and reporting. The process of first let's talk about witness reporting. So if a witness has an experience, we've already talked about that. You know, probably 90% of sightings do not get reported. You just get a handful of people that actually do. But why is it important for them to report what they've seen? What are some
Yeah,
of the
I think
reasons why
that's,
it's important?
yeah, absolutely. One is that perhaps we can help them understand what their experience was. And, for some people, it can be actually traumatic. It could be life changing. I mean, it's a big deal. And, they need to know that they will be treated with dignity and respect and kindness. We will, investigate their case in all earnestness, and even if it comes out something identified, at least they're going to know. They will learn something, and when you go to MUFON.com and submit a report, it's a pretty comprehensive questionnaire that you fill out, and there's probably, I'd say, 100 or more data sets that they elect, like, was it round, was it square, was it bright, was it, did it move in a straight line, what was its elevate, all these little details and things. It's pretty comprehensive. um, and so, and then what we're seeing a lot more are people are reporting experiences, such as abduction or contact. And again, I just want folks to know that while, our focus is on a UFO report, those are obviously related and they're obviously a high priority. And MUFON has now created a new branch, basically, and it's called the Experiencer Research Team. And so if you have or make a report regarding a contact of some sort, we'll investigate the circumstances of that and refer you to the ERT, who can help you, look for resources to help. Maybe you want to, see a medical professional or psychology, or a group where you can, talk about your experience. And, they provide a lot of assistance in that way. So, I think that's just terrific. And it's become a bigger part of the story of UFOs, and that's, contact experiences. So, and, we're, as an organization, we're learning from that. We're learning more, learning how to help people and that thing. So, I think that's probably kind of the big frontier that's coming up. And again, if you think a person is reluctant to report a UFO, 1 in 10, can you imagine what it is for someone who say, I've been visited or I was abducted? Maybe that's 1 in 1,000. I don't know. But, I think that's pretty impactful on this whole story. And I will be very curious to see how that develops in the future.
Yeah, I mean the whole abduction phenomena is uh, there's it's an interesting part of the conversation. It's super interesting because the experiences that people have are sometimes, they're sometimes positive experiences,
Hmm.
but a lot of times, like you said, a lot of these people have been traumatized and they don't know how to process it. So I think the
Yeah.
one of the what you said is that people it, it's better for people to talk about it than to just keep it bottled up because you're talking to people when you go to MUFON. You're talking to people that sincerely care. They're they're not going to dismiss your experience as fallacy or made up. They're going to take it
Hmm.
seriously. They're going to investigate it as if it were an incident report made to the police. And
Yeah,
if I'm not
absolutely.
mistaken, I think a lot of the investigators are work in law enforcement in one capacity or another. Is that true?
Oh yeah, we have very high population of law enforcement and military members or former, retired, within the ranks of MUFON, which is incredibly helpful, and it helps with the investigative side of it, bringing in that kind of experience, and you know it gives me good confidence in our team. We have actually a couple active police officers that are also investigators for MUFON. We have several retired. We have retired military as well. So, yeah, that's quite true. Not just Arizona or Phoenix MUFON, but nationwide.
And also to that point, the community of MUFON investigators also includes experiencers as well, people that have
Mhm.
either had sightings or I'm not sure if. Well, yeah, I think there are some people in the Nevada. Well, maybe I better not say that. I don't know. I don't know anybody personally, but I was assuming that maybe there are some people that have had
Yeah,
experiences with abduction or
well,
contact.
yeah, I will say that it's been my experience that many MUFON members are MUFON members and have become investigators because they have had an experience or a sighting.
Yeah.
And I find that myself, I'm kind of unique. I've not had one. And that was never my motivation for, joining MUFON. It was more just the intellectual curiosity about it. I mean, I had a mild interest, probably like everyone has some kind of a mild interest, but, um, it really developed when, for me, it was the Phoenix Lights because it happened in my own hometown. Of course, I didn't see anything, but um, so I think that is kind of an interesting fact that many people have had experiences. So, again, it's a body of people. So, you take 100 people, you're going to have, some of everybody, right? We have experiencers and we have, military and we have, non-experiencers and just this mix and variety of people, which I think that diversity is always healthy and, helps in the entire process. So even like when we do an investigation, say I'm in my investigator role, I perform my investigation, but then the chief investigator of the state and for Arizona, that's Dennis Freyermuth, he reviews everything in the case and he approves the case or not. And very frequently he'll come back to you and say, "Hey, did you think about this? Or did you see that? Or did you know about this or that?" And so, and he also is retired military, retired NASA guy, retired sheriff and things like that. So he has this huge body of life experience and technical skills that I get a benefit from. I didn't have them, but he helps me be a better investigator because of those skills. So there's a lot of that in MUFON, a lot of that sharing. We have people who are pilots, we have, scuba divers, we have, you just name it. And there's people with all sorts of background that's just really fantastic.
So people that are reporting these things know that they're working with people that are sincerely interested in helping those people. So, if that's another way that people, if they were interested in getting involved, can start to help spread the word that there are organizations that are willing and sincerely interested in helping people that have had experiences or sightings. And it's just all about talking to people. And now that the media is talking about it, which what we talked about earlier, the media and the stigmatism is starting to fall away. It's okay for people to talk to their neighbors, their family, their friends openly about it and not worry about getting ridiculed, made fun of. Because that giggle factor is starting to fall away, and it's only going to continue to get better, in my opinion. Now,
and that's huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of conferences coming up. I know of two in Nevada, one in Laughlin, one in Vegas this year. Do you have any plans on attending? And if you know of any in the Arizona area, feel free to mention those two.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to the MUFON Symposium in Las Vegas, and that's July 23rd, 4th, and 5th. And, hopefully I've got my vaccine by then. But I certainly plan on going and looking forward to that. I know that the UFO MegaCon in Laughlin is going forward. 2020 was brutal because of COVID and we couldn't meet. And that was painful because one of the things I enjoy very much about being associated with UFOs is the conferences and meeting all the people and hanging out and just, it's just so much fun. And, I've made just the most wonderful friends and everything as a result. But yeah, those are definitely ones I have in mind. And then there's always the granddaddy of all, one of my favorites is the UFOC, now I'm brain cramping here, International UFO Conference. And we had to do that last year in like a Zoom fashion, online, and it worked really well. But of course, the fun of going somewhere and staying in a hotel and, hanging out with people and that you definitely miss that camaraderie that comes with that. But, and I know, we're going to be doing another online conference. Last year we did, it's called All the Strange, by Rogue Planet TV. And we're looking to do that, near the end of May, I think. So that's another one. I think that you're going to see in 2021 a mix of online and live, and it'll just be really dependent on, the state of COVID for folks. And obviously the more we get a handle on that, then the more these conferences are going to come back. So I'm really looking forward to that because I just love it. Those are really fun. And, for a person that's, definitely interested, it is a way to really get up to speed quick by attending some of these conferences because the speakers are top notch. The topics are just, super relevant, and you get, to associate with the people who are, these are the people doing it. These are the people having these experiences and reporting on these. And so you can accelerate your knowledge and understanding by attending those and getting to know other people. And I know we talked about websites, but even Facebook has some really good pages of UFO groups, and you can tell right away. Some are more sensationalistic and what we call woo-woo, and they kind of go down the path of consciousness and other things. If that's what you like, those are there. If you're more of a nuts and bolts kind of UFO person, there's groups for that, and so on. Crop circles, or abductions, and I think those are really valuable tool to gain knowledge and to associate with other people and accelerate your progress, and those are really helpful too. So I would encourage that as well. And if you're out there listening in Facebook, you want to friend me, do it, and I'll hook you up and show you some different groups to get into, good ones.
Yeah, and that's a good
Be
point.
glad to.
I just wanted to add to what you were talking about with the Facebook groups and the websites that are out there. Um, it it's okay to just join those groups and be a lurker.
Mhm.
That's a term that people use because you just want to go in there and read the posts by other people. But you're going to get much more uh, out of the experience by engaging and
Yes.
talking to the people in those groups, because they're not scary people. They're actually friendly people that want to talk to other people. They're as
Mhm.
interested in spreading the word as Shane and I, and they're open and willing to talk to anybody who's sincere about pushing this conversation forward in the public. So yeah, it's okay to be a little bit hesitant at first, but if you really want to get the full experience, really start to reach out and talk to people and ask questions, because you know
Yes.
not everybody has all the answers, but a lot of people are trying to find those same answers, and somebody might be able to point you in the right direction to find those answers. But you got to ask.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's how I did it. I mean, I read every book, no kidding. I've read probably 100 books, watched 100 videos, blah blah blah. Got all to that point, but then it was like, well, now what do I do? And that's kind of when I got into it on Facebook, and I lurked for quite a while. I did lurk. I was a lurker, but what I was trying to do was, get a feel for what was going on and who knew what and that whole thing, and then when I felt confident, I interjected in a conversation, say, something real simple. And then later I got braver, and I, added a comment myself. And people are supportive of you. Hey, great comment, Shane. That was cool. Hey, where'd you learn that, or whatever? And then you get more confidence. And then, you kind of make these connections and friends, and you start, hooking up in these groups and having these just great discussions about current UFO events or past ones. I mean, it's all about, like you said, you've got to engage, and this is how you'll grow. And that's exactly what I did. I went from just consuming books to then getting into Facebook, then attending conferences and meeting more people there. And then I joined MUFON, and it just grew from there. So yeah, I'm a big supporter of engagement. That's going to accelerate you in the best way. It's awesome.
And that's one of the things that it's such a new process for people to have these online meetings, um, and the engagement is started to increase. But these conferences
Hmm.
being available online, it's really people just watching a video of a panel or a presenter, and then that engagement is kind of lost. That opportunity to, unless they do like private Zoom meetings after the presentation
Hmm.
or something like that. I'm not sure if the conferences are doing that, but it's going to be nice when they do open the doors and allow people to start gathering together again, because that's
Yeah.
really where you make those lifelong friendships and important connections with people.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so there's a quantum vortex energy has a pretty long comment or statement. Is there a question, Quantum, that you'd like to ask Shane? I appreciate you tuning in and listening to the talk, but I'd really rather have a question to post for Shane to answer. Um, Now, if now you mentioned Facebook, and do you have your own website,
I don't. Mm-mm. Now,
Shane?
I I do some writing and participate on Rogue Planet TV.
Yeah,
Um, and folks could go there and see some of the things that we're doing. And again, that's a good website for kind of like current events and things that are going on, and getting a good professional journalistic take on things. That's what you're going to see there. So I'm biased, but hey, I recommend it. It's a good site.
yeah, I totally recommend it
That's
too.
Jason.
Yeah, that's Jason's website. And he does writing on that website as well. So you're going to get a lot of content. But did you say what your Facebook page was if people wanted to connect with you?
Just my name, Shane Hurd. Yeah.
Okay. And you're on
Yeah, I
Twitter
don't have
also.
a group.
Are you
Yeah.
saying
Hurd
as
Ranch.
active on Twitter?
Yeah. I don't do a lot of Twitter. I mean, I lurk there for the most part, and I'll fire off a comment here and there, but just Facebook has been my primary source, and I am really busy, and I can't keep up with all of it, so I just kind of focus on the one. But nothing against it. It's great, and I do check it, but I'm not super active there.
Okay. So Facebook is the way people to reach out to you. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any new developments that I didn't think about to mention that you might have heard about? We talked about a ton of stuff, but I want to
Yeah.
make sure that that people get the most comprehensive information that possible.
Yeah, I think one that's kind of been in the story the last 3 days is interesting. Flight 2292, I think it was American Airlines, flying from Cincinnati to Phoenix. And over New Mexico, they had an encounter with an object. And I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's a ham operator. And he was actually kind of scouring the frequencies for any information on the Colorado airplane that lost the engine cover. The engine blew up a few days back, and he caught a transmission between flight 20. I think it's 2292 between the pilot and air traffic control. And he said, "You guys have any targets out here?" And they're like, "No." He says, "Well, there's one over me right now, a long cylindrical object, and." We're wondering what that is. And so that's been in the news. And I think that's really interesting because about 3 years ago, I think 2018-ish, the exact same thing had happened. And that got reported and made it in the media. So I don't know if there's a freeway going on up there, but they said, it wasn't on radar, but they cited it. And Kirtland Air Force Base and White Sands all denied, said, no, look, we don't have any, we don't test there ever, and we had nothing going on. So kind of a mystery. The FAA actually commented on it, and so did the FBI, which they never do. And they said, that they're investigating it, they're aware of it. And so they're not denying it, as they would have in the past. Now, of course, there was audio from the pilot made public, so it's kind of hard to deny in that case. But so that's pretty fascinating, and I just bring it up because what it shows, just as the Navy has indicated, is that there are encounters with these things every single day, every day. Somewhere somebody is, having an encounter with a flying object. So, I mean, it's amazing, really.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff going on in our skies that's unexplainable. Some of it is, misidentified, which you talked about. Some of it is top secret that the military will not admit to, and then, but there's a lot of it that's not. It's just simply not stuff that we know about. I mean, and that's why it's so interesting to us, because we want to know what it is, and not only what is it, but why are they here. That's that's where you talk about, you get into the consciousness part of the conversation, and that's a whole completely other part of the conversation. But it's fascinating. It's just, in my mind, it's just as
Yes.
fascinating as the nuts and bolts of what are these things.
Oh, I totally agree. And I mean, I always say this when it comes to the topic, the what, the where, and the when. The answers to those questions are data, right? We collect that data. We know what happened. I saw this thing here at this location at this time, and that's useful and provides information that you can work with. But really, that's where we're living now. What's really going to get interesting is the next two questions: the who and the why. So you
Exactly.
collect enough data on the what, where, and when. Hopefully, it leads to identifying the who. That will be the easier of the two. And then ultimately, the why. Now, that's going to be the hard one because, you know, you can't get inside the mind of another life form, basically. But, and isn't it interesting that that's still not the topic? Like, even with the Navy and Congress and all that, there's no mention of who or why. It's all about the what still. But the
Right.
what is much safer, right? That's safe. We can talk. I mean, for 75 years, they wouldn't even talk about the what, when, and where, or barely would, only if they're forced into it. So that's what I'm looking for next stage. To me, disclosure is going to be, it isn't about what, where, and when, because we know that already, and they're all over the
Mhm.
place. We've got,
Mhm.
MUFON has 113,000 cases in their database, and probably another 100,000 that were pre-computer. I mean, this is a well-documented thing happening every day all around us. That's not in dispute. What, where, and when, we know it. Who and why, that's what we're really after.
Yeah, those are the, those are the, like you said, those are the next part of the question. And I mean, there are people who have said that they've had communications with the pilots of these craft. If you
Mm.
believe what they say, there's a number of agendas that these beings are are here for. But we won't get into that. I mean, that's a whole completely different
Yeah,
topic. We'll do that another time. It's an
same,
interesting
same.
topic. I think there's a lot of legitimacy to what these people are saying,
Sure.
but it's just a completely different topic than what we're talking about tonight. Um, how many cases are you currently working yourself, and have you completed any investigations that you can share some of the some of the less um, not confidential details, but
Yeah. Well, I get about two a month, maybe 2 to 4 a month. And, it takes you 30 days to, you have up to 3 months really to work a case. And of course, there's more simple cases and more complex cases. And, obviously the more complex, the more time it takes. Um, and generally, a lot of the cases are the lights in the sky case, which, I find to be frustrating because, you know, you really can't do much with them. If you have the good fortune to have something actionable, great, but a lot of times you don't. Um, and then, some of the more interesting cases are the contact cases, and I just completed one. Although I feel that that one was resolved through the investigative process. I think we identified what really happened there. I probably can't say yet; it's not closed, um, but about done with it. And I think that one was identifiable. But working another case right now that it's a sighting of an object that, I mean, unfortunately, it's a single witness case and there's no video, photo, physical evidence. But it's really interesting that the person was within 200 or 300 feet, which is super close. And if you know about Dr. J. Allen Hynek in Blue Book, that he created the close encounter scale, like close encounter of the first kind, second, and third. and one of the features of that scale is that if you see if you're within 500 feet of seeing something, that makes it an interesting sighting, at least to Hynek, because within 500 feet, it's hard to mistake, something for something else. You've got enough visual data and audible data to, even smell, whatever. Your senses are going to detect what you're seeing pretty well. So this one is a CE2 case where it's within 500 feet, and it created physical effects. It flew over a parking lot at 3:20 in the afternoon, and the street lights, or the parking lot lights that it passed over, turned on, and then after it left, they went off. So that, to me, that's kind of interesting. And the visual description of it, and its motion and behavior, again, if this is all truthful, I mean, there's no mistaking what it was, because he was that close. So I'll be interested to see what we can do with that one. But see, this is a struggle that we face, right? It's limited data. All you can do is make a decision based off the data you have. And you don't control what data you have to work with. So that's where I get frustrated, is because I think something could really be something, but you just don't have enough data to make that call. So it's a little frustrating that way.
Well, yeah. I mean, it would be nice to have evidence. I've had this conversation with quite a few people, and that is the whole idea of how come more people don't use their cell phone cameras to take pictures when they're within that proximity of these objects. And the typical answer to that is because your brain disengages and you're just in awe of what you're witnessing. And you want to soak up every minute, every second of what you're actually witnessing. So you're not thinking about capturing evidence at that moment. That's why a trained observer is more apt to have evidence, like a photograph or some other type of a video. What other kind of evidence is there? There's physical evidence if it lands, but.
And I like to use this little illustration because, a lot of the skeptics will throw out there, not the skeptics, the debunkers. Well, this UFO business is baloney because there's millions of cell phones and there should be millions of pictures of UFOs. But let's just do a little mind experiment here. Say you and I are walking down the street and I tell you, okay, Andrew, in 10 seconds, there's going to be a pink Corvette coming down the road at 60 miles an hour. Pull your phone out and take a picture of it. You know what's going to happen? It's going to be long gone before you get anywhere close to it. Now just think about that. And
I had a first-hand
second learning.
I had a first-hand experience with that exact scenario, but it was there. Do you remember back in? I think it might have been like April or May last year. The Air Force was doing flybys throughout the cities, in some of the major cities. Well, they did that here in Las Vegas because Nellis Air Force Base is right here. So they did. It might have been closer to July, around the 4th of July or something. But they did flybys, and they went. I knew they were out there. They started out in the north end of town, did flybys in the north side and then the west side, and then they came over here. They flew right past my house and went out to Boulder City, and then I'm thinking, okay, man, I got a couple of minutes. I don't know why I thought I would have that much time to prepare, but I'm up on my rooftop with my camera in my hand. Before I knew it, boom, I have already passed me, And I'm like, oh man, those things, that it's just, I luckily captured some photos, but in, I was in the prime position to do it. And I was still surprised when they came by me.
Yes.
So
Great illustration.
yeah. And when I had that experience, I thought, man, that right there. And most people they got to fumble to get the phone out of their pocket, or more than likely, they're just in such awe of what they're experiencing. They're not even thinking about capturing a photo.
Yeah. And that's what most people say when you ask them, how come you didn't get a photo? So I was just too busy looking at the thing. I didn't even think to do that. And, I think that's a very reasonable human reaction. And I even tested myself, to try. And I have planes that fly over here too. And I got it in my pocket, heard it coming, or a chopper or something. And I tried to test myself to see if I could get my phone out, open it, select,
Right.
camera, and get it pointed up there, and boom. And it is tough. It's tough. It is not. So again, I scoff at this debunkery where there should be millions of them. Oh, really? Well, there are a million pictures of bears. Are there a million pictures of whatever? No, it is not as easy as it sounds. And you don't even know
Were
a
you
UFO
with that particular case? Were you at least able to have maybe a sketch artist draw what the witness had seen?
I always ask the witness if there's not a photo or video. I ask them if they can draw it for me, because we're visual creatures, right? And a picture's worth 1,000 words, and all those things. And so, and it can also help them elicit details that they may not have, orally communicated in our interview. But once they sit down and put it to paper and draw it, then they remember other things. So, no, I think that's very helpful. And I like to upload those to the case so that something is there in addition to just a witness statement. And yeah, I think that is a very effective investigative tool. And I think it's healthy and good for the reporting person as well.
In this particular case, did that happen?
Yep.
Were you able to get a
Yep.
drawing?
And
Oh, cool.
mhm. And kind of cool is we knew, obviously we got the coordinates of where he was standing, and the structure he was near, where the light poles are. Then we correlate that with Google Earth, and then you can kind of set pins, and you can draw flight paths, and we know the elevation. Because of that, of the object, we know the dimensions of the object as reported because of it. I mean, you can start, putting a lot together. And I always say, UFOs and the reports are very geographic centric. And in fact, that's my business. I'm in geographic information systems and mapping. And so much data can be elicited from that you can really paint a pretty good picture with that information. And I think we're going to be able to do that in this case as well. And when you do that, you can correlate it to, there's an application called Flight Aware where you can track the flights of also, aircraft, and you can overlay that, and you can see, is there a potential that what he saw was, this, flight 2292 or whatever, that you can really get there, in the investigative process. So all those pieces of information are very valuable. I mean, you still may end up with, it's an unknown, or, hey, it was a helicopter, or it was a, whatever. But that's the point of an investigation.
With an incident like that one that you're talking about specifically, where is there ever a point where you issue a press release for the local community to kind of solicit more witnesses to come forward?
No, because first of all, when a person makes a report, it's confidential, and they have the option of remaining anonymous or not. But MUFON could not and would not ever release any of that information unless a person specifically asks it and signs a document authorizing it. So the direct answer is no, we don't do that. Now, if there were something like a flap going on where, like with the Phoenix Lights and hundreds and thousands of people are seeing this, and then you want to go back later and investigate that, I think you could do that in a case like that, because it's not just one person and their identity and their experience, but it's a shared experience, very public. I think you could do something like that.
Yeah, I could see where that would want to be kept confidential unless the person agrees to or has a desire to put that information out there to the public. Well, I think that's going to be it for tonight, Shane. I mean, we covered quite a bit, and we'll have more opportunities to talk. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to meet each other either in Laughlin or in Las Vegas this year.
Yeah, we definitely need to do that. Absolutely.
Yeah. But one more time, just give people. Say that again.
We can have an old-fashioned.
Yeah, right. My drink of choice will be a White Russian. I'm not really crazy about bourbon. Yeah, I don't like whiskey.
That's okay. That's respectable.
Yeah, but give people your contact information one more time, just so that if anybody wants to reach out.
So my name's Shane Hurd, ShaneHurd on Facebook. Also, you can reach me at rogueplanet.tv. Also my email, I'm happy to give that out, Hurd Ranch, HURDRANCH at, and yes, I know, don't laugh, AOL.com. And
you said don't laugh, but I can't help it.
And then Shane at PhoenixMUFON.com.
Cool. All right, Shane. Well, I mean, great conversation as always, my friend. I appreciate you being here. I look forward to next time we get to have a conversation, and stay in touch.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you very much. And hope everyone enjoyed the conversation. And, if you're interested, it's worth it. I want to tell you, it is absolutely worth it getting involved. It's a great topic. It's satisfying. It's fun. The people are awesome. And, you won't regret it.
Yeah. We had some great questions and great input tonight, man. I appreciate you guys joining in the conversation with the chat. Everybody have a good night, and we'll see.